MP5s. Who doesn't love them? They've been the signature sub-gun of heroes since the 1960s. To this day, there's still this romantic and nostalgic light surrounding them. Gazing upon H&K's masterpiece, you are teleported into the dawn of time, synonymous with black kit and everyone's favourite word, tactical. There are several manufacturers that have attempted a gas blowback MP5, but only a few that are still in production. The most popular are these two. Hey guys, Bada Bing here. I've wanted to make this video for a while, and with the release of VFC's latest Gen 2, now is a perfect time to put these guns in the ring. I present to you the VFC HK MP5A5 version 2 versus the WE MP5A3, or Apache A3. Two gas blowback submachine guns, but there can be only one. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you love content like this and want to show your support, the best way is by hitting the like, share and subscribe. Now this is going to be a long video, so feel free to use the timestamps in the timeline or in the description if you want to jump to specific sections. In the meantime, pour yourself a cup of coffee, put your feet up, and let's do this. VFC debuted their gas MP5 over 8 years ago, and it fired from a 30-round green gas magazine. CO2 mags were also available at the time. Their original MP5 had a fairly checkered history. It was business as usual with VFC when it came to the beautiful externals, but internals and out-of-the-box performance left a lot to be desired. You can still find old videos on this platform that show their MP5 in its underwhelming infancy. Many upgrades were made available, but in reality their version 1 MP5s only needed inexpensive bolt guides to enable it to run reliably. Sadly, the damage was done, and it was avoided by many potential buyers, myself included, and it kind of faded away. Fast forward to today when they decided to restart the engine of their HK SMG with the release of their first variant of the improved version 2 series, the SD3. WE Tech brought their Apache series online at the end of 2013. Amazingly, they delivered virtually every variant of the MP5, from the standard sized model, the SDs, and the Kurtz versions, all being fed by either a short 20-round and long 45-round green gas magazine. To this day, their MP5s are renowned for being the best gas blowback MP5s in existence. So, as the VFC MP5s disappeared, the WE series stood unchallenged for years, until now. I've reviewed both of these gas blowbacks and you can find the links in the description. These two may look similar, but they are completely different underneath. Things like the bolt carriers, nozzles, trigger packs and magazines are not compatible with each other. Apart from some interchangeability between handguards and maybe one or two other things, they aren't related at all. VFC have done a stellar job on their MP5. The majority of the externals are steel. The upper receiver in particular is a piece of stamped steel. The few parts on the outside that are made from an alloy include the front iron sight, charging grip, and the stock rails. Everything else is either polymer or steel. The finish is beautifully replicated in a gorgeous matte black, and the attention to detail is on point. HK trademarks, welder markings, it looks very authentic. The view of the bolt carrier through the ejection port clearly has another edge in realism compared to the WE. The steel 3-lug flash hider lacks a thread for a suppressor, unlike the WE where it's included, although VFC do make the navy threaded adapter piece if you are interested. The front iron sight is glorious. The details are as you'd expect, precisely defined. The finish maintains the same colour as the rest of the metal parts. Best of all, it's firmly bolted onto the SMG, unlike the other MP5. The charging assembly has a lot of slack to it, likely the lower tolerances between the cocking tube and the cocking support, so it rattles around in there. The cocking tube within is made from a cheap metal. The handle grip is made from an alloy, however, upon closer inspection the pin it's attached to is steel, so you can slap it all you like and it won't break. The support tube though says otherwise. The plastic foregrip is the traditional MP5 wide forend and provides a solid base to handle the SMG. It has no play or anything, just a good place to wrap your hand around. Like the WE MP5, beneath it you can access the hop-up wheel, which is conveniently placed, and if your eyes are sharp enough you can detect the directional arrows to indicate the adjustment. The magazine well has that narrow window like most MP5s where it can take some practicing for a slick insertion. There's almost no way to explain that without sounding filthy, but it's true. It's a bit tricky at first, but after some time it goes in easier. Oh, I did it again. Once seated, the magazines are held in place firmly. The version 2 magazine is a well-made piece of the VFC MP5. It's comprised of an internal gas tank that is wrapped by a realistic steel shell that has an awesome look and feel to it. The green gas-only magazine has a capacity of 30 BBs, which loads into the channel very smoothly with the included BB loader. Like most things on the VFC SMG, these are not compatible with the WE MP5, and vice versa. As a weapon system developed in the 1960s, the optics mounting point requires an adapter. Unfortunately, I don't have one that fits the VFC, only the ones made for the slightly thinner airsoft MP5 receivers, like the WE. You'd have to either find the real one or buy the VFC accessory. The navy lower has a smooth texture and it feels solid to hold. Just by looking at it you can see it's well made, and the finishing is blacker with a higher gloss than the WE. It better replicates the hue of the real H-case feature. Rotating the selector switch feels light but positive and mechanical. It's like changing gears in a car. With each sweep it deliberately and lightly falls onto each fire mode. The rear iron sight is a marvellous bookend to a magnificent sight picture. It articulates to each of the apertures with heavy rotations. The retractable stock continues to stick when retracting. The up and down play from the end cap is still heavily prevalent, but I've discovered if you push the release tab away from you, deeper into its lock, this helps stiffen up the entire stock assembly, so much so that it's almost as rigid as a fixed buttstock. Just look at it now, it's rock solid. The stock rails, unlike most I've had over the years, there's virtually no play. They're held in place very tightly by the end cap, so in actual fact it's one of the best telescoping MP5 stocks I've ever had, only it's annoying as hell to manually engage that reinforced lock to get it to that stage. The WE MP5 has a stamped steel upper receiver as well, although elements of its appearance in comparison to the VFC is what you'd expect to find from a cheap, fake watch. WE neglects a lot of the finer details. From a distance it's unnoticeable, but up close the difference is striking. Alloy parts on the outside include the front iron sight, front sling loop, charging handle grip, magazine, and stock rails. Everything else is either polymer or steel. The finish isn't anywhere near as nice as the A5's. It's cheap, glossy black paint. This one is showing its age after being through 3 owners in its lifetime. No markings here besides the 9mm caliber engravings, which look terrible. On their unsuppressed MP5s, primarily the A2, A3 and K PDW, the navy flash hider is included. It serves no purpose beyond aesthetics, and I don't tend to attach it to the SMG as it adds needless weight. Looks pretty cool though. The details on the front iron sight aren't as sharp. It's finished with a dark grey paint job which flakes off easily. The only steel piece is a removable post itself and the end cap, not the sling loop. Because it's mounted to the barrel and merely braces over the cocking tube, it has a substantial amount of play. VFC benefits from a screw-on cap to lock it onto the upper cocking tube, and the WE doesn't. You can do your best to tighten the outer barrel and the barrel nut, however it's always going to be an inferior aspect. Moving along, The charging handle feels more rigid than the VFC's because of the heavy steel internal cocking support, which has a tighter tolerance within the outer tube. The handle itself is similar to the VFC, where it's built upon a steel pin for HK slapping durability. The handguards are practically identical between these two brands. The only real differences to speak of are the rougher texture, and it doesn't have the flat edge line on the sides like the VFC. Just as the VFC, it's a well-built hand grip that is as rigid as can be. The hop-up dial is in a similar place, although its larger surface area makes it far easier to adjust. If it wasn't for the aggressively steep angle of the magazine catch, the insertion would be a lot smoother. Removing the magazine is slick and easy, it's just installing a mag. That is something that has never gotten any better. The magazine is retained with a positive lock, but it does tend to flop around while it's in there. WE offers several magazines for their Apache series. The ones I have are all 45 round open front style. The version 1 magazine had an exaggerated curve to them, while these version 2s have been corrected. The finish is terrible, and the paint comes off so quickly. The thickness is unrealistic as well, and you might have issues fitting them into the dual magazine clamps. Compared to the VFCs, they are thicker, and are clearly heavy blocks of cast metal, which lack the same kind of real feel. The great thing about these magazines though, is the increased capacity over its opponent. Furthermore, they have the dry fire mode, and a bolt stop feature that drops the hammer. The lower receiver has a good rough texture to it. WE always produces quality nylon fibre. It's strong and doesn't have any flex. The bullet pictograms aren't as nice as VFC's. The ambidextrous selector switch clicks onto each mode just as well as the VFC, although it can be rotated beyond safe, which is weird. The rear iron sight matches the colour at the front. It rotates onto each aperture easier than its opponent, but locking in just as positively. The stock's base cap is fixed to the receiver with no sloppiness to it, and it has a smooth retraction with 3 extensions. In those regards, it's doing better than the VFC. However, like almost every other Airsoft A3 stock, its wobble from the stock rails is inescapable. Internals. The charging controls between these two are among the tiny list of parts that are surprisingly compatible with each other. The VFC charging support tube borrows its design from the real steel, but of course they would. This one is cast metal, and as I pointed out earlier, it's a hideously dull component, which after roughly a year's worth of HK slaps decided to break during the making of this video, and when it happened I couldn't help but laugh. In comparison, the WE is a heavy steel component that makes its HK slap feel aggressive. The WE charging assembly within the VFC gives you a heavy metallic clank, and the feedback is so much better than the original. The VFC parts inside the Apache doesn't work quite as well because the locking detent gets a little caught up. Would I recommend upgrading the VFC with WE internals? It might be better in the long run, but I'd exercise caution just in case it creates wear on existing stock parts. Both MP5s have fairly realistic lower fire control groups, so that's a plus for authenticity, although admittedly the VFC has a better finish than the WE. The VFC pack can be removed from the lower receiver without tools. The WE isn't as straightforward. Another similarity is that those internal components are not made from steel. No surprise there when WE are concerned, as they are famous for having soft internals. It is disappointing that VFC haven't bothered to further improve their internals using steel parts. Their Gen 2 ARs have had this treatment. I haven't had that many rounds through the VFC compared to the WE, but the trigger group looks to have worn in rather well. Perhaps they don't take on as much stress to warrant the reinforced upgrade pack, only time will tell. The WE continues to rock and roll despite the lack of steel. Because of its bolt stop feature, it has a couple of more internal parts within the trigger pack, so you could say you've got more things to go wrong, and you'd be right. Another common flaw with the WE Apache series is the failure of the 3-round burst mechanism. Specifically, it wears out part number 50 and begins shooting 4 rounds or more while you're in burst mode. It is no big deal, just replace that part and it should restore the 3-round burst. The hop-up chambers are secured in similar ways. I do prefer WE's method, which uses a threaded nut and a pin to hold it in place. These two chambers can accept most gas blowback type buckings and barrels. The VFC has 2 grub screws which locks the barrel and chamber assembly into the receiver, only you remove it through the rear of the upper and not from the front. The VFC hop-up wheel is thinner than the WE, and this is most likely due to them wanting to make it as low profile as possible so it doesn't get in the way of real railed handguards, something the WE does not take into account. The calibration has positive clicks as you rotate the wheel, and it allows you to finely tune the hop, although probably over-engineered for such a short CQB platform, but still, it's nice to have. It uses 2 grub screws to secure both halves of the chamber, and it's all really well built. The WE chamber has a slight advantage over the VFC chamber as it is quicker to extract and disassemble. The bad news is it's made out of a brittle material that can easily break. I removed it a few times to get these shots, and that resulted in me chipping off a piece. Yeah, WE and their rubbish components is no myth. Since owning it, I needed to buy another chamber because the threading snapped off, and that's purely from general disassembly. As easy as it is to remove, I suggest you don't make a habit of it. The WE hop-up wheel offers no incremental indications, it simply glides through and stops at its maximum setting. From a user-friendly perspective, you can grasp and rotate the wheel far easier than the VFC. However, a lot of the time the calibration is up to interpretation and whether micro adjustments take effect. On the other MP5, VFC's tactile rotations is like setting a 0 on a scope, and it delivers such an accurate setting that you can definitively tell within a single click which setting is working best for your BB, and that's what makes their chamber just that little bit better. Anyway, both of these have a good range of adjustment to cater for a variety of BB weights. Bolt carriers. The VFC carrier differs quite a lot from the WE. First of all, their version 2 bolt has the recoil spring assembly attached to it, with a steel buffer extension. To counteract the weight of that steel buffer extension, the version 2 has a large cylinder size, which allows for a big old puff of gas to drive the action. The disassembly of the bolt is fairly straightforward, but it's the reassembly that is the real pain in the ass. As you can see, the carrier and the nozzle have typical wear marks from roughly 3000 cycles, and it's held up okay. The nozzle loading tip is constantly taking beatings as it engages the magazine follower, because this is VFC's bolt stop method. You can certainly tell it's been hammered. The WE MP5 bolt carrier is a touch more accurate to the real MP5 bolt assembly. It has a higher amount of parts to remove for a complete takedown compared to the VFC, but it's not as fiddly to put back together, and it can be done within a couple of minutes. The overall finish is cheap and lacks the same kind of aesthetic quality as VFC's. It has obvious signs of paint wear on the places where you'd expect, and it bears the scars of a well-running operation. The WE recoil spring is stiffer than the VFC's, and that's part of the reason why its HK slap feels so much better. The VFC bolt carrier assembly weighs 286 grams, and the WE version is over 100 grams lighter at 182 grams, so let's see how far these two will go in a series of gas charges. These SMGs were completely stock while conducting these tests. With just a 5-second propane charge, the VFC blasted out 59 shots in total. The WE, with the same amount of gas charged, 5 seconds only squeezed out 45 shots. Right away we see VFC pulling into the lead. 10 seconds of propane and the VFC recorded 142 shots. For the same amount of gas, the WE spat out only 77. Okay, the separation in performance is becoming extremely one-sided now. 15 seconds of propane granted 199 shots to the VFC, with its dying breath being 200. The WE MP5 passed the 100 shot barrier at this point with 136. Now, at this point both magazines are chilled to the core, and this lets them really drink up every last sip of a 20-second gas charge, although it sounded like the WE stopped swallowing fresh propane at 19 seconds. VFC MP5 was able to splutter out an incredible 236 shots. WE, on the other hand, just about made it to 167. This is as best as I could record these figures with my digital scales and process of 1 shot per second. Your results may vary, but I ran these tests a few times each, and ultimately they yielded the same result. The VFC can do more with the same amount of gas than the WE could. There's no scenario where the Apache came out on top, the VFC just owned it. Of course you would and should never charge this much gas into the magazine. All that liquid gas would be waterboarding your MP5 to death. So yeah, I told you these twins are completely different, didn't I? Recording a series of results through the chrono at a cosy British summer's 25 degrees, and the VFC MP5 opened up with 404.4 FPS, which just goes to show how hot this gas gun is. Its 30th and final shot was 355.8, losing 48.6 FPS and an average of 376.5 overall. This is far too hot for us here, so I used an FG Airsoft 20% restrictor disc, and it tamed the output exactly by 100 FPS, 304.4 and ending up at 266.8, a loss of 37.6 FPS from 1 to 30, averaging 283 FPS overall. The WE in its stock configuration recorded an opening speed of 360.5 and ending with 309.6, a slightly greater loss of 50.9. The average reading was 330.3. Instead of use a WE open bolt end pass, or like my VFC, using a restrictor disc, I used a shorter length inner barrel to cut down the FPS for CQB standards, and this is to keep the gas system running hot without running high on the chrono. So, we see it begin with 310.7 and end on 264.7, losing 46 FPS and averaging 283.5. Both platforms firing a single shot every 5 seconds and loaded with 10 seconds of propane. Comparatively, the VFC lost fewer feet per second throughout these tests. So, here's the part we've all been looking forward to, shooting these MP5s. The VFC MP5 has a crisp shooting experience. With every trigger pull it delivers a fast jolt and runs with a hell of a lot of enthusiasm. It just wants to go. The main recoil spring is fairly soft, and it uses that thick steel buffer on the back of the bolt to reduce the length of travel, just enough to collide with the stiff buffer spring and catapult it back forward, resulting in a fast cyclic operation. Paired with its version 2 large bore nozzle and its version 2 magazine, the VFC MP5 shines from the first to the last shot. It happily jumps around in your hands, and as it's a bit lighter than the WE, it feels more athletic and gives you a buzz. coming up and running the gun, you have a highly charged sense of acceleration. Fully automatic performance is superb. When you throw it into the fun mode, the VFC MP5 blazes through the 30 rounds in rapid succession, and as long as it's not a cold day, it can do it without a hint of cooldown and decrease in tempo. The high-performing gas system is so good that it can mag dump 3 times from a single charge of gas, and still keep some left over to comfortably store it for next time. When shooting is concerned, the VFC MP5 really comes into its own. The 3-round burst mode works identically to the real HK MP5, where if you tap the trigger as fast as you can to let off one shot, the following full squeeze will give you a full 3-shot burst. The VFC will have no memory whatsoever. This function is enjoyable and spits out those 3 shots with deliberate positivity. In comparison, the WE-MP5 is almost the same. On semi-automatic, the action is snappy, and the trigger operation allows you to get off tight bursts of single-shot fire a little easier than the VFC. The recoil spring is stiffer than the VFC's, and it enables the Apache to be just as fast. However, during burst or automatic fire, that stiffer spring exhausts its gas system quicker, and this helps create the infamous low rate of fire on the WE Apache series. Magazine dumps begin quite fast, before slowing down to a consistent chatter. Don't forget that it can store over 15 BBs more than the VFC, so it has to work longer until the MP5 is empty. As long as the correct amount of gas is charged, it'll always torch off the BBs and end with a click as a hammer drops on empty. Of course, temperature being a factor. Fully automatic is fun, despite the slower speed, and it can get through almost 2 loads of BBs before the gas tank is out. The final few shots will splutter out just as the reserves hit empty. Jump number 2. The Apache's 3-round burst mode rattles off with a consistent rate, albeit slower than the VFC burst pack. The difference here is that it has a memory to it. Following a fast trigger tap, it'll continue on with a 2-shot burst before it resets. Now, looking at the triggers, and the VFC features a long, heavy pull. Squeeze in, and you feel a thick barrier, and the break is a couple of millimeters beyond that, and it's something you really can't easily familiarise yourself with. Backing off around 6 millimeters, and you will hear a light click as it resets, and with no felt indication through the face of the trigger itself. The whole action is heavy, mushy, and tough to rocket through in a hurry. The whole operation of the Apache fares better. While there's no clear resistance to mark a wall, it smoothly pulls through to a break. The reset sucks your finger forward from the spring tension to a solid felt clunk. In its entirety, it effortlessly burns off rapid semi-auto fire, and it doesn't require much input from you to make this happen. It's certainly superior in my eyes. The bolt stop features on these MP5s are worlds apart. The WE Tech version uses a neat arrangement of tabs and levers on the magazine, so that once the last shot has been fired, the BB follower will deactivate the firing mode by elevating the firing pin. The next time you pull the trigger, it drops the hammer with a clunk, just like what you'd have on the real thing. It's an excellent method to stop the gun from cycling, however its gift is also a curse, because if you forget to pull down the tab on the rear of the magazine once you've loaded it, the tab will remain in its upward position and the MP5 won't fire. You have to remember to flick them down again once reloaded. As I mentioned earlier, these can be configured to dry fire mode. Simply hold down the rear lever and flick the upper tab so it points in the upward position, and now you can shoot the Apache without it cutting out. The VFC MP5 has a less elegant affair when it comes to stopping the action. It has no catches, tabs or levers, it depends solely on the BB follower to stop the nozzle from returning to battery. Basically, it smashes into the follower to stop it from firing again. The bolt carrier ends its journey here. A realistic MP5 like this gives you the illusion you have a jam. When you pull the magazine, the working parts slide off and return home. Recoil. Which one has the stronger recoil? Well, first of all, they aren't going to be giving you a lot of it, seeing as their bolt carriers are small, lightweight, and the submachine guns are not supposed to be recoil intensive. They're not GBBRs. Regardless, I thought I'd use a cup of water taped onto the MP5 to best illustrate the recoil performance of both SMGs. Now there isn't much in it, is there? I ran this test a few times, 30 round mag dumps, and taping the cups as strongly as possible so they don't slip off, and the results remain the same. The WE continued to lose the most water, so there's your answer. Okay, so doing a little bit of cold weather tryouts with the VFC MP5 and the WE MP5 now. I've given the magazines a bath. It's a bucket of water basically that's just been sat out in here in the freezing temperatures, and it's been snowing, so it's as cold as I can make it. So I think we will try the WE first. The magazine has been loaded with 10 seconds of propane. I'm really not expecting much out of this, but we'll see how we get on. If it can finish the 30 round magazine, then great. If it can't, then it's too cold for it. So let's begin. There we go. Range 10 meters. It's not very good. Mag's sticking to my fingers, and we've got 4 BBs left in the magazine. 4 or 5, yeah, okay, 3 BBs left in the magazine. Okay, WE MP5 fails. Let's see what the VFC one's like. Okay, same deal. Propane, 30 rounds. The version 2, VFC MP5. Come on, you gotta do better than the WE. And I love the WE, but I also love this one, so let's see how we get on, shall we? God, that magazine is cold. Yeah! It's alive! Okay, initially the BBs were going out to around almost 50 meters, but now they're slowly descending. "20 meters, if that." Ooh, a little bit of a hiccup. And she is empty. It managed to 30 BBs and do that weird VFC lockback thing that it does. Yeah, the VFC MP5 on the propane wins cold weather testing. Alright, okay, back with the WE MP5. Do not let me down now, because I'm trying Garda black gas in this thing. So it's pretty serious gas right there, so come on WE, do not let me down. 30 rounds, let's go. Ooh. Okay, range is about 10 meters, if that. And she's dead with... Oh, that magazine's freezing. 5 rounds in the magazine, and yeah, nothing in the chamber. Got a black gas. Okay, now it's we've got the VFC MP5 running on Garda black gas. So let's see how we get on. It was good with propane, it worked, but let's see what some stronger fuel does with the VFC MP5. Started off really strong, but performance is going down. I'm only getting about 10 meters, if that. It's beginning to descend. And there we go. And she's empty. VFC MP5, definitely a winner. Accuracy. When it comes down to the accuracy, both SMGs, with all original parts, perform about the same. Warming up and the first scores at 20 meters using Jeff Bio 3s yielded similar results, BBs planting themselves all around the page. The WE scoring more hits on paper as I had more ammo in the magazine to fire. On the second series, the VFC landed 23 shots, more along the centre of the page, up and down, concentrating 12 shots within the size of my fist. The Apache was a little better than before, although not as precise as the other one, making 20 holes out of 30, and the rest flying left and high of the box. The third and final targets settled with equally spaced groupings. These MP5s focused their efforts in practically an identical pattern, with the odd BB landing low and some striking high. Out of the box, I'd say they're acceptable, more than capable for the field. Can they be improved upon? You betcha. But remember, it's in their nature to storm rooms, they don't have to be surgical. So here we are, the conclusion. The VFC MP5 version 2 versus the WE MP5. Traditionally on reviews I discuss the pros and cons. This time around I'm going to break it down into the top 5 reasons why one is better than the other. Here are 5 reasons why the VFC MP5 is better than the WE. Number 1. This thing looks beautiful. The overall finish of this SMG is magnificent. They've really captured the essence of what the HK MP5 is all about, and that's just the externals. We've barely scratched the surface. There's no denying it's in a different league. The colour, the hue and the very presence it has must make the Apache not want to step out of its box. This also extends beneath those gorgeous externals. Those internal parts are even finished to a finer degree. Number 2. This SMG loves to shoot. Once you take off that safety and begin firing, you can tell the VFC engineers have tuned it to a point where it's reached the apex of gas blowback heaven. The version 2 gas system and its magazines makes it one of the best gas blowback SMGs I've ever used. They can do so much with just 8 seconds of propane. I don't know how they made them run so well, but they did. As we saw, they were even superior during the winter. Number 3. VFC gas blowbacks are no stranger to real steel parts compatibility. If you want to build the most realistic airsoft MP5, you cannot choose a better platform than a VFC. Most of the time it's a drop-in fit. Number 4. Upgrade support. It seems that third-party brands are stepping up to produce various internal components, so you could really tech it out underneath with steel fire controls, aluminium nozzles, if you really wanted to waste your money on those, and other fancy aftermarket enhancements, so you can do a lot with it. It's like VFC just got back into the game and were instantly given every opportunity that WE didn't get, and their Apache has been around for years. And number 5, VFC are offering the classic 3-position SEF polymer control group, something that's not available to the WE Tech series, and I think there are a lot of people out there that would much prefer the older style MP5 controls, myself included. With the dawn of VFC's version 2 SD3, they are slowly releasing the entire MP5 family, and you'll be able to pick your favourite. Now, here are 5 reasons why the WE MP5 is better than the VFC. Number 1. They practically have all the MP5 variants available, so whichever version you like best, WE Tech have made it. Number 2. The magazines, while chunky and heavy, they have a large BB capacity for a gas blowback. At a squeeze they can take on 48 BBs, although it's best to download them to relieve the stress. With a higher capacity than the VFC, you can afford to send a few more shots down range, or be out on the field for longer. From that point of view, it's a better candidate for skirmishing. Then there's also the dry fire mode, which is a handy feature to have. And if that's your thing, drum magazines are also available from third-party vendors. Number 3. The bolt stop on empty is my favourite method out of the 2 MP5s. As long as you remember to manage the tab when reloading, you can always enjoy the realistic click when you go empty. Number 4. Parts availability just edged out in front of the competition. If you need spare parts, there's a plentiful supply from Asia, and surprisingly enough I was able to source a few insignificant little parts from EU stores, so they have a broader range of support. And number 5, this system has proved itself a reliable skirmish blaster over the years. During my time with it, it has been subjected to countless amounts of dry fire hammer drops and thousands of cycles. If I didn't mention it earlier, I'm the 3rd person to own this particular MP5, so I have no idea what kind of life it had before me. At its core, it's maintained exceptional reliability. The charging assembly has seen and survived more slaps than Sean Connery's wife. And that's all because WE Tech understood it's a critical high-stress component. Too bad VFC didn't slap the hell out of theirs during R&D. Now, the number 1 thing you want to know is, which one is best? Honestly, there is no straightforward answer. Respectively, they are both great at what they do, and they achieve this very differently. If you've gotten this far, you can plainly see they are not perfect. There's a sense of irony in H&K's marketing slogan, "No compromise," because that's all we're doing with these two. Pick the less attractive WE and your iron sight wobbles all over the place, magazines weigh more than my car and are just as big, it sounds more like a grease gun than an MP5, and it uses low grade materials on many of their components. Choose the attractively realistic, not so realistic bolt stop VFC and your spare parts are half a planet away, you have to manually fix the retractable stock, the burst trigger pack resets like the AC button in my car, and your cocking tube is only good for a year of schlaps, if that. It's also incredibly expensive in the EU, which makes no sense as the internals are no better than the WE. Umarex are really wetting their beaks in this part of the world, I tell you. No compromise? Ha! It's a tough call. Whichever brand you choose, you have to accept the flaws of one and reject the other based upon theirs. If you ask me to pick one and discard the other, I guess I would choose the one which provides the core features I want most out of a gas blowback MP5, and that's performance, and one that delivers an awe-inspiring, eye-watering presence simply by sitting in front of me. And that, my friends, is the VFC MP5A5. The other negatives this SMG has, and it has a few of those, I can look past, because I know it won't take much to get it to where it needs to be. All I want to do with it is acquire an H&K charging tube, and maybe pick up a real Navy lower with the SEF markings, along with some other real accoutrements. Then I don't care if it only has 30 rounds, I don't care if the bolt stop is weird. This system is phenomenal. Running this MP5 almost gives me the Maruzen MP5K vibes, and if you're an airsoft old-timer like me, you'll remember how fast those were. Combine that snappy roar with its lighter profile and accurately spec'd externals, and it's a subgun that echoes the legend of the real-world counterpart. Take into account those third-party companies that are supporting the VFC, then one could build the ultimate gas MP5. That's what this MP5 offers, a platform to build the very best replica possible, while having that superb version 2 gas system at its heart. The nozzle impingement on the BB follower being my prime complaint that gets in the way of total superiority. When I first heard they were going to be making these again, I instantly thought, too little, too late. The WE is going to be hard to beat. And when I started to write this to consider the VFC version 2 ST3 early last year, it wasn't enough back then to win against the Apache. It was close, sure, but I chose the WE. It came down to the wire and the VFC MP5 SD's hop-up unit sealed its fate. With the introduction of the easier to adjust MP5A5 hop, I reconsidered VFC's efforts and arrived at my choice. Outside of my own preferences, does that mean you shouldn't choose a WE Tech MP5? God no. With the Apache, what you see is what you get. You don't gain any better or worse stock accuracy. All you need to do is pick up a few extra magazines and play. A no-nonsense gas blowback brawler. Look at all the other benefits I listed above and you might find that it is the best gas MP5 for you. Hell, I was so confident in the WE series that I picked up the Kurtz. And that says a lot when I thought just one Tokyo Marui M4 GBBR was enough for me, and that's probably the best gas blowback rifle on the planet. Still, I didn't want two of them. There is no absolute winner in this discussion, only the key factors which matter to you. So tell me, which one are you storming a room with? Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a monumental journey over the last year, reviewing both of these subguns, and an even harder journey just making this video. It's one of the reasons why I put off making these, as they are so difficult to produce, and I end up getting tunnel vision to everything else going on. If you made it this far, you are the best. Thanks for staying with me. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, you'd be helping out a ton by supporting the channel. You can do that by hitting the like, subscribing, and of course, sharing the video. You can see regular updates by following me on Facebook and on Instagram. So until next time, look after yourselves. Catch you in a bit.